Welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So today we are using the gel plate, posca pens and acrylic paint. We are going to do some doodling, some glazing and some negative painting. This is an abstract piece, although it does start out looking slightly like a face, then like a teapot, then like a Chinese dragon. It does look like a stormtrooper at one point as well. I was really pleased with it though because it was completely different to something I would normally do. So this has been inspired by PM Artist Studio, who have been doing a lot of doodling lately and they call it faba doodling. Patricia does a lot of more complex doodling. It's more than just your basics that people put on top of watercolour. It's quite fascinating. And then there is Gel with Mark, who has been using posca pens, and I watched his video before watching this. And also Gerda Lipsky, who does a lot of negative painting with acrylic paints, and it's quite amazing. So we're just using a variety of colours. We're just, at this stage, there is no plan for where this is heading. I do lots of layers, so doodling on top of doodling. The sort of teapot handle at the moment. So I've graduated the blue from quite dense to lighter from the top, and then now I'm doing the same with yellow, but I'm using a different pattern. So these are just a variety of coloured posca pens. They're just the basics: red, blue, yellow, green, purple, pink, black and white. I was really quite pleased with how quickly I just round them off. These are mostly the 5M, I think, and there's some of the slightly bigger chisel point ones. So you can see sometimes I'm using them while the other colour is still wet and it gives them a bit of a blend, and then other times I'm waiting until it's completely dry. My preference is to try and wait until it's completely dry because then you get a nicer separation in the pattern. But then because I'm doing it, like I'm doing layers of doodling, you know, it's okay if they do blend a wee bit. So I did find that because I had watched the PM Artist Studio where Patricia was doing them with the kind of more layering aspect, I didn't feel that same need to have every single section different. See, I've turned it upside down now and it looks like a face now. What it is because the posca pens are wet, you don't want to be leaning the side of your hand in them, so I do turn the plate quite a lot. So when I said about the posca pens blending, ideally we do not want them blending together unless it's like red and blue to make kind of like purple or whatever. But because the posca pens take quite a long time to dry on the gel plate, and this picture isn't something you just let dry a couple of times. We're using a lot of different colours. We're using them next to each other, on top of each other. It's hard to let them fully dry. But I was willing to give it a go anyway and see where we ended up. So overall, I was pleased with this picture. I would say that when I did my first pull, the pen marks, even though it's acrylic paint, the pen marks do give it a childlike quality. So what I did was I put a glaze on it. So to give it a more, well, the posca pen colours I'm using are like, you know, primary and secondary colours. So I put a glaze on it to try and just make them a bit more muted, a bit more mature, and obviously to bring the whole picture together. And then I added in the white paint to do the negative painting with. And I was really pleased with how it turned out in the end. So one thing this morning when I was watching Gel with Mark, which really, I thought was something that I really probably could do with to give that more polished look to my gel prints, is he was talking about, obviously if it's a picture you're spending a long time on, then, if you do 2 coats of colour, it can't, it means that you're having a more solid colour and it'll give you more of a silk screen print effect. And I thought, that was actually really, really helpful. And so PM Artist Studio as well, they do a lot of mixed media work with stencils and with trying different techniques, like journaling. Patricia's recently done a flower book where she made all the flowers from gel prints, and currently they've been looking at the doodling because there's quite a lot of people doing that just now. Darcy's Misadventures of Mixed Media, she does a lot of doodling as well. So I'm giving it a shot myself. So one thing I have noticed, so with the doodling you think, you've got to make all these different lines, shapes, patterns, okay? But there's more to it than just what shape you draw. There's the thickness of your pen, there's the pressure you're applying, there's, for example, on the handle, when I did the lines with the bigger white Posca pen, I kind of staggered them. So the lines that are quite jaggy edged, even though they are just straight lines, there's a bit of texture in those lines and the edges aren't perfectly sharp. So even just the way you draw the shape, the tool you use to draw the shape, the thickness of the line, the pressure, the colour, the value, all those different things, and obviously layering it as well. I mean, because we're layering shapes and lines on top of each other. That all adds into it. So, I'm calling it doodling, and then people say mark making, and in my mind, they're actually very similar. I think doodling's associated with brighter colours, with being in school with your biro, doodling when you're supposed to be taking notes of a serious subject. And then mark making's all about, I think that's seen as a more adult version of it, where you use more expensive products and you try to come up with different ways to use it. So I'm not quite sure what the difference between the two is. So if anybody knows, please tell me. Mark making's probably really serious, and I'm saying it's just like doodling. So you can see there in the kind of, at this stage it's looking a bit more like an insect, that there is a lot of layers being added in now. So we're going to pull this off with white paint. Now, bearing in mind there's a lot of layers of Posca pen on here, I thought this was dry. And it wasn't. So what's happened is when I'm putting on the white paint, the Posca pen colours start leaking through. I think for this many layers of Posca pen, I probably should have left it for hours or overnight. So you can see it there. So my intention was just to put the white pen over the Posca pens and then do something in the outside. But now we're in the kind of let's save it mode. So I do keep checking the underneath, and the underneath is fine, it's intact, it's sharp, it's as it should be. So what I've done is I've put down, this is a very, very thick layer of paint because I'm trying not to overly disturb the Posca pens. because I've put a lot of work into that. So that's it being laid out with the paintbrush. So now I know it's fully covered. I'm coming in with the brayer lightly. And that's really just to try and reduce the drying time. Because obviously there's a lot of paint there. I'm using 300 GSM watercolour paper. So I'm not concerned about the paper's ability to handle the paint. So this is it when I pulled it off the gel plate. And then now what I'm doing is I'm adding in a glaze. And I didn't record all of this, I'm sorry. I didn't think this would turn out well, actually. So I have cadmium, orange, red. I have glazing medium, which you could use matte medium for. And I have a lot of water. And you can see it sitting on the small gel plate. And I just put it over my painting with a paintbrush. You need to keep this, it's got to be very thin, watery and runny, because you don't want to make your painting the colour that you choose to use on top of it. Now, I chose to use the orange with one tiny drop of burnt sienna in it. And that's because I wanted a colour that wouldn't take over, but it would harmonise them together, but it would also mute them down. I wanted it to give it almost like a sort of brownie tone. So here I'm putting on the white acrylic paint. So I do about 3 coats of this, just to try and, you know, make it look more solid. And then what I started doing was I took the white posca pen and I started sort of doodling into the overall large shape. And that's when I thought, oh, this is looking really good. And I thought I'd share it with you. So I will do this again, and I will do it with a lot more knowledge, as in let your posca pens dry overnight, because that was silly. And obviously I'll spend more time on talking about the glazing, and then we'll do this cutting in with the negative painting, cutting into the shapes, you know, from beginning to end, rather than just giving you a snapshot of it. But I'm just amazed at, from the disaster we had at the beginning, you know, when we put on the layer of paint to pull the picture, I'm just amazed at how amazingly it's turned out. So that's my version of doodling. And it just shows what you can learn from other people, because this was 3 different YouTube channels, you know, that I've took inspiration from for this, and then sort of combined the techniques that I'd learned on each. My only concern here is I might keep cutting into this shape to the extent I'm left with a blank white page. No, I've stopped, I promise. But I will be doing this again. But it just shows you how, you know, how much you can actually do with it. So that is us, and I'd like to say thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye.